Number 5, we're going to see what happens when a hurricane strikes the world's richest city, Hurricane Sandy, which hit Cuba, Haiti, and the USA in 2012.
There is something potentially scary brewing in the Atlantic Ocean.
Conditions this year are similar to 1991, the year of the perfect storm.
Modern satellite imagery and modeling technology allows meteorologists to more accurately predict which storms are likely to become hurricanes and predict the paths they're likely to take. However, these cyclones can still offer a few unpredictable surprises, and Sandy had plenty.
That's not a very good direction. It's a very unusual one.
We watch it, we watch it, we watch it, we watch it.
Okay, great to have you with us tonight, Sam. Thank you.
In October of
Hurricane
2012,
Sandy is
it was a
pounding
Category
Jamaica
3
tonight.
hurricane that very quickly made landfall in Cuba, Haiti, and Jamaica. Sandy caused widespread damage across these islands, destroying populated areas and leaving upwards of 200,000 homeless, but amazingly, only caused 60 deaths. After its journey across those islands, Sandy appeared to be petering out, was on course to be just another fairly standard Atlantic hurricane. But Sandy's trajectory took it to the United States, and what happened next
Sunday
made
night
it
into
historical.
Monday, and that's when things could definitely get a little bit tricky.
Thanks to unusually warm waters along the eastern coast of the U.S., Sandy regained her strength and hurricane status, deluging every coastal state all the way up to the Canadian border.
The Mid-Atlantic region is bracing for Sandy, a slow-moving monster of unprecedented size and scope.
This
The
is a
storm.
rare phenomenon, but not unheard of.
It's likely to continue to intensify as
However,
it approaches the
when it hit
coast.
the northeast USA, it combined with a cold air storm
calling
coming
it
down from the north to
Frankenstorm.
form what was called at the time a Frankenstorm.
By next splashing over the seawalls at the tip of lower Manhattan.
It consisted of snow, wind, and rain. Statistically, Sandy is the largest storm ever recorded. It had gale-force winds across a 1,600-kilometer diameter. The storm's size would have covered all of Central Europe, from Edinburgh to Marseille, and Barcelona to Berlin. A storm with such power and fury could only be fatal. When Sandy made landfall on the coast of New Jersey, it had the perfect conditions for an equally monstrous storm surge. Landfall occurred at night, during the high tide, and during the full moon, which makes it the highest of high tides. It had never been this high before. The storm surge was measured at 5 meters and carried a remarkable 800 kilometers inland.
Down here, it is almost completely dark.
The storm was so powerful that the residents of New York City, the city that never sleeps, could only hunker down for a nap.
But downtown, it's clear the Big Apple took a big hit. Lower Manhattan, normally vibrant and bustling, now looking eerily like something out of a disaster movie.
Hoping to keep people safe, the city shut down mass transit.
The subway and other transport networks were shut down for days, a vanishingly rare occurrence for a system that usually runs 24/7 all year round. Large areas of Manhattan were flooded. Sandy was truly cataclysmic for the city. Across the eastern USA, 233 people died, 650,000 homes were destroyed, and 8 million people were left without power. Sandy caused $70 billion in property damage. The cost to the economy, measured in billions per day, was never calculated. For the scale of destruction, the loss of life was relatively low. Had this monster storm turned left instead of right, hitting the poorer Central American countries, the death toll would have been unimaginable. Cyclone recording keeping started in 957 AD. Since then, over 12,000 cyclones since have been recorded. Most of those didn't make this list, but there are a few notable storms that came close. These are the record breakers. Cyclone Olivia that hit Western Australia in 1996 has the fastest recorded wind gusts, reaching an incredible 420 kilometers per hour, which is faster than the speed of an F1 Indy car. In 2013, Super Typhoon Haiyan devastated the Philippines. With winds estimated at 315 kilometers per hour, it is considered to be one of the strongest typhoons ever recorded in the region. On the islands, nothing could withstand its power and fury. Submerged Reunion Island in 1980.
Il pleut à verse sur le département.
Over a 2-week period, it dropped 6 meters of rain, which was more than Maria, Mitch, and Nina combined.
Car Hyacinthe l'imprévisible.
And last, in 1994, Hurricane John set the record for being both the longest lasting and the most traveled. John traveled from Africa to Central America, crossed over into the Pacific, and then traveled far enough west to be classified as a typhoon. Hurricane John lasted for an incredible 31 days and traveled 13,000 kilometers, all of it at sea. These are terrifying statistics, but the scariest part is that all these records will almost certainly be broken.
To get out here at this hour.
So far, the damage and destruction we've seen has been largely unavoidable. But in some storms, there are human factors that contribute to the catastrophe. That was the case with our number 4, Typhoon Nina in China. Nina struck in the middle of the 1975 storm season. It had already caused considerable damage in Taiwan before making landfall again in southern China. China is used to the sort of winds that come with typhoons. Nina's winds were relatively weak, clocking speeds of just 180 kilometers per hour. The province of Henan was totally devastated. On day 1, Nina dropped 1 meter of rain on China. That's more rain than a country like the UK expects to see in a full year. The deluge was enough to cause cataclysmic flooding and landslides. Henan province has hundreds of dams that were built to provide electricity to the region. They were built to rigorous standards and are expected to withstand the kind of rainfall that only happens once every 1,000 years. Those standards were nowhere near what they were being exposed to. Under the incredible extra weight of all that extra water, 62 of the region's dams collapsed, releasing massive walls of water that didn't simply flood. They wiped towns and villages off the map. 12,000 square kilometers of land, an area the size of Hawaii, was inundated with water. More than 30 cities were completely flooded and cut off from the rest of the world. The official death toll from Typhoon Nina stands at 240,000, though some estimates put the figure over 1 million. The secrecy of the Chinese state likely means we'll never know the true figure. Damage costs for the destruction would venture into the tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. For a truly industrialized country, it was an unparalleled level of devastation. The flooding and deaths were unavoidable given the historic rainfall. However, if the dams had not been there in the first place, the flooding would have been more catastrophic. China's engineers took every precaution. But steel and concrete don't stand a chance when confronted by the full brutal power of nature. Katrina showed unavoidable human failures, our number 3 demonstrates the damage that sheer negligence can cause. It's Cyclone Nargis from 2008. Asia is the real hotbed for cyclonic activity. The warm waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans and the near year-round warm air means that these areas are on constant alert for the next typhoon or cyclone. At least most countries are. When Cyclone Nargis formed in the Indian Ocean in April 2008, right at the very start of the region's storm season, Indian authorities warned all their neighbors to pay close attention. Most countries did. Indian fishermen moored their boats. Bangladeshi rice farmers hurriedly harvested for fear of food shortages. However, Myanmar's military rulers did nothing, and thousands of their citizens would pay the price. As with so many other cyclones, it wasn't the intensity of the winds that caused the biggest problems. The winds peaked at 215 kilometers per hour, but a number of factors combined to make this one of the deadliest cyclones on record. On the 2nd of May, Nargis made landfall near enough to the Irrawaddy Delta to cause a massive storm surge over 5 meters high. The water raced up and over the densely populated riverbanks and islands and traveled 50 kilometers upriver. The damage was cataclysmic. 95% of all buildings in the area were destroyed, and 90,000 people were killed.
The United Nations says it has made a formal offer to send an assistance, but the ruling military junta has not responded.
Additionally, 50,000 people from the area were declared missing and never found. Once the number of dead or missing reached 140,000 people, the authorities allegedly stopped counting. With so many dead and millions more made homeless, the need for assistance was paramount.
We provide potential for a tremendous capability. We stood ready, we were well trained, we were well briefed, and ready to execute at a moment's notice.
But the isolated junta resisted almost all outside offers of help.
Channel 4 News has obtained these new images of the desperation in Laputa, one of the most devastated areas of the Delta.
An already bleak situation was becoming worse as overrun sewage systems burst and destroyed all the crops on the Delta. Already without shelter, the survivors were now without food or clean water. After 2 long weeks, Myanmar's leaders finally allowed foreign assistance to enter the country, only to be thwarted by a massive earthquake in the southern area of China called Sichuan. The quake destroyed much of the area's roads and delayed valuable help even further. Fortunately, the scourge of diseases didn't reach the population as international organizations had feared. The strength of the storm surge and the poverty of the region meant that death and destruction on a large scale was almost inevitable. But it's impossible to say how many lives might have been saved had the junta given their people ample warning and allowed foreign aid to immediately help. Today, the official death toll of 138,000 makes it one of the deadliest cyclones on record. But there can be no doubt that the true figure is far higher. That was just the point at which they stopped counting. Some estimate the figure to be closer to 300,000. Cyclones rarely need help from people to wreak havoc. Sadly, this was an example of people making a bad situation worse. Even the richest countries on Earth can take nature's fury and make it worse. We present number 2 on our list from 2005, Hurricane Katrina.
Water's coming in the room through the air conditioning vent.
Katrina was the most famous and most filmed hurricane of all time.
Jim Reed and myself were in Gulfport.
Ironically, it wasn't the most powerful, most destructive, or most deadly hurricane to ever strike the United States. Katrina looked like a tropical storm that was fizzling out as it approached the Gulf of Mexico in August 2005. Then, favorable conditions saw it rapidly gain strength until it became a Category 5 storm with wind speeds of 280 kilometers per hour. Katrina suddenly and unexpectedly turned and headed towards the USA's Gulf Coast. Though the hurricane was downgraded to a Category 3, the authorities were quick to act.
Every person is hereby ordered to immediately evacuate the city of New Orleans.
A rarely seen mandatory evacuation order was issued in New Orleans, with those who chose to remain being warned to write their names and social security numbers on their flag and permanent markers so authorities could identify their bodies.
I wish I had better news, but we are facing a storm that many fear.
Even though they were warned and knew what was coming, the results were still shocking.
We got a car that's getting ready to come right in the lobby now.
New Orleans was built 300 years ago on a natural bowl, with much of the area sitting below sea level. To prevent flooding, in the 1960s, the U.S. Army engineers constructed a series of levees that would control the water. They should have been built to a depth of 12 meters, but in an attempt to save money, they were built to only a depth of 6 meters instead of 12. Their failure was inevitable, and when faced with Katrina's storm surge, they failed quickly. In a matter of hours, 80% of New Orleans ended up under as much as 3 meters of water. Most had heeded the warning to flee. Some had chosen not to evacuate, and others had been unable to. We learned that completely evacuating a large city is a monumental challenge. Tens of thousands were left stranded in a flooded and abandoned city. The media broadcast live coverage to the world of the struggles of survivors, bringing the power of hurricanes into stark focus. This was a storm strong enough to bring a superpower country to its knees. Survivors huddled on whatever higher ground they could find. Some used overpasses, some used rooftops, and thousands gathered in the city's Superdome football stadium, which became hell on earth.
They've taken hours after hours to get here. We've been waiting hours. It's stinking out here. It's just disgusting and frustrating. And we are human beings, and they're treating us like we're criminals.
Violence erupted, and there wasn't enough security to stop it. We had rape victims, we had assault victims.
It's just hard for me to believe that this is America.
All right, so people here feeling scared about what this night's going to bring and feeling neglected by their government officials.
The rescue effort for the desperate began in earnest. In truth, it was part rescue and part salvage. Rescuers used boats to go from door to door in the submerged wards that housed the largely poor and black population of the city. All right. The walls of the searched houses would be marked with details of who had searched them and when, and if bodies or survivors were found. Though some mistakes were made. Many of these markings remain to this day, a stark reminder of one of the darkest points in recent American history. The final death toll was just over 1,800. Tragedy of that is surpassed by the fact that most of the deaths were avoidable. The cost, however, was monumental. The money for relief and recovery that is not yet complete was put in excess of $150 billion. This was the damage caused by a Category 3 hurricane. Ironically, had Katrina maintained its Category 5 status and 280-kilometer-per-hour winds, the damage could have been much worse. The aftermath of Katrina will be felt across Louisiana for decades to come. Many left New Orleans never to return. When certain neighborhoods were rezoned and gentrified, it forced the former residents who were poor to have to relocate. Katrina is evidence of how modern world circumstances can combine to create monumental disaster. If the hurricane hit hadn't been direct, the levees may not have been broken. If in the 1960s the levees had been properly built, at a cost of millions, they would likely have held and not led to damage that cost billions.
As you can see, the winds are
Despite not being one of the fastest, biggest, or deadliest hurricanes, Katrina is worthy of its place in our top 10. Katrina demonstrated that even in the 21st century, one of these storms can cripple one of the most powerful countries on the planet and almost totally destroy a modern city.
It's not a good idea to get out here at this hour.
At number 1, we have a cyclone that combines all the ingredients we've seen across the rest of the top 10. It was a perfect storm that led to one of the greatest human disasters of the modern world. It's the Bola cyclone of 1970. Bola was born in the North Indian Ocean and fluctuated between being a Category 1 and Category 3 storm as it moved its way through the Bay of Bengal and up towards Bangladesh. That area was called East Pakistan. The storm was strong, but by no means the most powerful cyclone of the year. Authorities were able to track it and had a good idea of where it was going to make landfall, but the government had closed the radio warning system, which meant that millions of people would get no warning. Bola made landfall close to the Ganges Delta after sunset, around high tide, putting it in the worst possible place and at the worst possible time. The densely populated, low-lying islands of the Delta were filled with hand-built shelters comprised of bamboo, palm fronds, and sheet metal. The dwellings offered no resistance to massive 6-meter surges. A wall of water the height of a 2-story house arrived without any warning and in the dark. It would have been as terrifying as it was remorseless. Entire islands were wiped clean of crops, livestock, and houses. Tens of thousands of people were washed out to sea, never to be found. Across the region, everything was battered by strong winds, accompanied by flooding and mudslides. Those who survived the initial onslaught were left in darkness, not knowing what had just happened, and unable to seek or help other survivors. Worse was still to come. As the bloated corpses of tens of thousands of victims and farm animals polluted the water supply, cholera and typhoid spread, causing even more death. The diet of those in the area was almost exclusively rice and fish. The cyclone had washed away almost all of the seasonal rice crop, and 60% of the fishing fleet had been destroyed. Between the initial impact and the diseases and hardship that followed, it's estimated that 500,000 people died, and another 50 million were displaced. Those numbers are hard to comprehend. Even for for an area used to devastating floods and powerful cyclones. The scale of Bola was unprecedented. Some estimates say 85% of homes in the area were badly damaged or destroyed. If the storm had just hit 100 kilometers further south, the loss of life would have been dramatically less. And if it had struck during the day, the population might have had a chance. The combination was fatal. Measuring only for its wind speed of 200 kilometers per hour, Bola is one of the less powerful cyclones on this list. It was less than half the size of Sandy. Its rainfall was dramatically lower than Nina, Maria, or Mitch. But as a result of the unique circumstances and a gigantic storm surge, the death toll could be equal to the combined death toll of the other 9 storms on the list. Never before or since have we seen the circumstances of timing, location, human error, and poverty come together in such a way that created such total devastation. Hopefully, we never will again.